When we look at the wealthiest individuals on the planet, our minds naturally default to a state of envy and admiration. We see Elon Musk commanding global headlines, launching rockets into the heavens, reshaping global infrastructure, and sitting atop a net worth that defies human comprehension. The media paints him as a real-life superhero, a modern-day Iron Man who moves from one multi-billion-dollar victory to the next with flawless execution. But this is the ultimate illusion of success. Society has a pathological habit of celebrating the trophy while completely ignoring the blood, sweat, and psychological trauma that stained the floor during the training. The raw, unvarnished reality of Elon Musk is not a story of effortless genius. It is a story of profound isolation, agonizing sacrifices, physical breakdown, and a terrifying proximity to complete and utter ruin. True greatness is never a gift. It is a brutal transaction. The universe demands a price for extraordinary achievement, and that price is usually paid in the currency of your sanity, your peace of mind, and your personal relationships. To truly understand the foundation of this empire, we cannot look at the billionaire standing on a stage today. We must look at the roots. We must look at a deeply traumatized child, a desperate young coder sleeping on an office couch, and a man who, in the year 2008, stood just days away from losing absolutely everything. To understand the intense, almost manic obsession that drives Elon Musk, we have to travel back to Pretoria, South Africa, during the 1970s and 80s. He was not born with an iron will. His will was forged in a furnace of severe childhood adversity. Musk was an incredibly quiet, introverted, and socially awkward boy. While other children were playing sports and forming social bonds, he was locked in his room, reading through entire sets of encyclopedias for hours on end. He could not relate to the world around him, and because he was different, the world punished him brutally. School was not a place of safety. It was a violent hunting ground. A vicious gang of bullies targeted him relentlessly for years. The climax of this torment occurred when a group of boys ambushed him, pushed him down a flight of concrete stairs, and proceeded to beat him until he lost consciousness. He woke up in a hospital bed with his face unrecognizable and his nose completely shattered, an injury that would require corrective surgery decades later. Yet, the physical violence at school was nothing compared to the psychological warfare waiting for him at home. His relationship with his father was emotionally abusive and toxic, filled with a level of cruelty that Musk still refuses to speak about in detail to this day. He grew up in an environment where he felt completely unprotected, alone, and powerless. This is where the famous roots of his obsession were planted. When a child is raised in constant emotional chaos, their brain adapts by seeking total control over their environment. His obsessive drive to build rockets and dominate global industries did not come from a peaceful desire to innovate. It came from a deep, subconscious need to conquer a world that he once found terrifyingly unsafe. When Musk arrived in North America as a young man, he had no safety net, no family wealth, and no guarantees. He was a broke immigrant chasing an elusive vision. During the mid-90s, when he co-founded his first internet startup called Zip2, the financial pressure was suffocating. He and his brother could not afford to rent both an office space and an apartment. So, they made a choice that most ordinary people would find unlivable. They rented a tiny, cramped office space instead. Musk slept on a cheap, uncomfortable futon right next to his desk. He had no bathroom or shower in the facility, forcing him to walk blocks away to the local YMCA just to wash himself. The business was operating on a single, fragile computer. Because they couldn't afford a server, the computer ran their website during the day, which meant Musk had to stay awake all through the night, fueled by caffeine and sheer desperation, to write the code that kept the company alive. He worked 7 days a week, 14 to 16 hours a day, pushing his physical body to the absolute limits of human endurance. He did not have a social life, he did not have hobbies, and he did not have comfort. He sacrificed his entire youth for a gamble. And even when that gamble paid off and Zip2 was sold for hundreds of millions of dollars, the emotional toll did not stop. Musk immediately took the majority of his payout and plunged it into his next venture, X.com, which would eventually become PayPal. It was here that he learned the brutal, cold-hearted nature of corporate success. While Musk was on a rare, much-needed vacation to save his failing health and fix his collapsing personal life, his closest co-founders and board members turned against him. They staged a silent corporate coup behind his back and fired him from the position of chief executive officer. He was cast aside by the very company he had bled for, proving a devastating truth that every aspiring entrepreneur must understand. Success does not buy loyalty, and the higher you climb, the sharper the knives become. By the end of 2008, Elon Musk was not just battling economic forces. He was engaged in a psychological war against his own body and mind. The line between ambition and self-destruction had completely blurred. When you are operating a rocket company and an automotive startup simultaneously during a global financial collapse, there is no room for error. Every single morning, he woke up to a reality where a single misstep meant public humiliation and absolute bankruptcy. The physical toll of this environment was catastrophic. He was survival coding on 4 hours of sleep, consuming massive amounts of caffeine, and experiencing debilitating stomach pains and blinding headaches from the sheer volume of cortisol pumping through his veins. His friends and close advisors looked at him and saw a man who was systematically killing himself for a vision that the rest of the world considered impossible. The public laughter from Wall Street and traditional aerospace companies was deafening. They called him a wealthy internet playboy who was foolishly playing with fire, wasting his PayPal fortune on vanity projects. But they did not understand the pathology of his mind. Musk was not driven by the desire to be rich. He was already rich. He was driven by a terrifying, hyper-focused obsession that made defeat a psychological impossibility. He had convinced himself that if SpaceX failed, humanity's future among the stars would be delayed by decades. And if Tesla failed, the transition to sustainable energy would stall. He carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, an unsustainable burden that brought him to the absolute brink of a nervous breakdown. The emotional vacuum worsened when his personal life turned into a public spectacle. His marriage to his first wife, Justine, had completely fractured under the immense pressure of his career. Musk is a man who demands absolute perfection in his work, and he brought that same rigid, uncompromising intensity into his household. He was emotionally distant, perpetually distracted by the impending doom of his factories, and completely unavailable to his family. The subsequent divorce was not a quiet, private matter. It was a vicious, highly publicized legal battle that played out across international media and blogs. Every single day, while trying to negotiate loans to pay his factory workers, Musk had to read headlines analyzing his failed marriage, his parenting, and his psychological flaws. He was being stripped naked before the global public. To compound this emotional trauma, he was still quietly carrying the deep, unhealed grief of losing his firstborn son, Nevada Alexander, who had tragically died of sudden infant death syndrome years prior. He was a man mourning a child, losing a wife, burning through his life savings, and watching his companies bleed to death all at the exact same time. This is the hidden dark side of extreme success that the motivational videos never show you. It is a lonely, cold, and agonizing dark night of the soul where you are surrounded by millions of people, yet completely and utterly alone in your pain. The climax of this nightmare arrived in September of 2008. SpaceX had already suffered 3 consecutive, highly expensive failures. The first rocket caught fire, the second failed to reach orbit, the third staged incorrectly and destroyed itself. Musk had exactly enough money left in his personal accounts to fund one final attempt. The fourth launch was not just a scientific test, it was a literal life-or-death moment for his entire empire. If the fourth rocket exploded, SpaceX would instantly close its doors, Tesla would lose its primary emergency funding source, and over 1,000 employees would be thrown into the streets. On the day of the launch, the tension inside the mission control room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Engineers were shaking, executives were holding their breath, and Musk stood in the corner, his face pale, knowing that his entire legacy hung on a sequence of automated commands. The engines ignited. The Falcon 1 cleared the tower, piercing through the atmosphere. For several agonizing minutes, the tracking data flickered, and then the screen showed the truth. The rocket had achieved perfect orbit. It was the first privately developed liquid fuel rocket to ever succeed in human history. Against all mathematical odds, they had broken through the wall. The room erupted into tears and cheers, but Musk could barely smile. The relief was immense, but the financial war was far from over. SpaceX had proven it could fly, but it still had no major contracts, and Tesla was still just 3 days away from complete financial death. The lesson of 2008 is a chilling reminder of how fragile success truly is, even after you achieve a historic breakthrough. Winning a single battle does not mean you have won the war. Elon Musk had successfully put a rocket into space, but as the clock ticked toward Christmas of 2008, Tesla's bank accounts hit rock bottom. He needed a miracle, and he needed it within 72 hours. He began a desperate, frantic round of negotiations with investors, begging them to put more money into a car company that the media insisted was already dead. He even went as far as offering his remaining personal capital, down to his last dollar, to show he was willing to go down with the ship. The pressure was so intense that he admitted he would frequently wake up in a state of sheer panic, completely disoriented, with his heart racing at dangerous speeds. He was standing on a tightrope over an abyss. If the investors walked away, the historic victory of SpaceX would mean absolutely nothing. He would still be a bankrupt, disgraced executive. This is the ultimate crucible of leadership, the ability to maintain absolute composure and project unshakable confidence to your team when you are internally suffocating from doubt and terror. As the sun began to rise on Christmas Eve of 2008, the destiny of Elon Musk's entire life was decided in a matter of minutes. The historic success of the fourth SpaceX launch had kept his aerospace dreams alive, but Tesla was still flatlining on the operating table. He had spent the previous 48 hours in a state of continuous, high-stakes negotiations, looking into the eyes of investors who were terrified of the worsening global recession. Musk had presented them with a brutal, transparent truth. He was putting every single penny of his remaining capital into the company. He was not keeping a safety net for himself. He was willing to go completely broke alongside them. This raw display of absolute vulnerability and unshakable conviction finally broke the ice. The investors signed the closing documents, injection millions of dollars into Tesla just hours before the Christmas holiday. Concurrently, NASA called with a transforming announcement. They were awarding SpaceX a $1.6 billion contract to resupply the International Space Station. The impossible had happened. In the span of a single weekend, Elon Musk had transitioned from the absolute brink of total bankruptcy to commanding two of the most valuable and revolutionary companies in modern human history. But the true narrative of this victory is not that Elon Musk won. The true narrative is the immense, permanent scar that the victory left on his psyche. Society looks at his current multi-billion-dollar net worth and assumes that the trauma of 2008 is a distant memory. But human psychology does not work that way. When you survive that level of prolonged, suffocating stress, when you spend months waking up screaming from night terrors, vomiting from anxiety, and watching your personal life disintegrate under a global spotlight, your brain is permanently altered. Musk did not emerge from that crucible as a peaceful, contented businessman. He emerged as a permanently battle-hardened executive who can only operate in a state of perpetual crisis. Success did not cure his obsession, it validated it. It taught his subconscious mind that the only way to survive is to work harder, push faster, and sacrifice more. This is the ultimate trap of extreme achievement. If you do not learn how to manage and respect the height of your success, your ambition will eventually become your executioner. The very traits that allow an individual to build an empire, the stubbornness, the refusal to accept reality, the complete disregard for personal comfort, are the exact same traits that can cause the empire to collapse if they are not governed with self-awareness. The journey of FamousRoots teaches us an uncomfortable, undeniable truth about human greatness. Success is never a permanent destination. It is a daily management of gravity. If you climb to the peak of the world but fail to build a stable emotional and operational foundation, the higher you are, the more violent your eventual fall will be. True success requires a balanced maturity to realize that your work cannot be your entire identity. If you sacrifice your health, your family, your morals, and your internal peace to grab the crown, you will eventually find yourself sitting alone on a golden throne, surrounded by wealth, but completely bankrupt inside. When we look into the famous roots of Elon Musk's life, we find three profound, life-altering lessons that every single one of us can apply to our own personal journeys. First, we learn that extraordinary resilience is always forged in the dark. True strength is not born during moments of comfort and applause. It is constructed when you are standing in the absolute depths of obscurity, rejection, and isolation. Your past struggles and childhood adversities do not have to define your limitations. They can be utilized as the raw fuel to build an unbreakable iron will. Second, we discover that every level of great success demands a specific, painful sacrifice. You cannot achieve a life of extraordinary impact while clinging desperately to a life of comfortable normalcy. You must be willing to trade your short-term comfort, your leisure time, and your fear of judgment for long-term legacy. You must pay the price up front, long before the world ever validates your vision. Third, and perhaps most importantly, this story proves that reaching the top is only half the battle. Managing the top is where the real struggle begins. Wealth, power, and global fame will amplify exactly who you are. If you do not possess the discipline to govern your ego, protect your core relationships, and maintain your physical and mental well-being, the very empire you built with your bare hands will eventually collapse directly on top of you. True greatness is not just about how high you can climb. It is about how well you can maintain your humanity while surviving the thin air at the peak. If this raw, unfiltered look into the dark reality of success shook your perspective today, do not keep this wisdom to yourself. Hit that like button right now to help us share this truth with the world. Subscribe to Famous Roots immediately and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our deep, educational breakdowns of the world's most iconic figures. Drop a comment below sharing the biggest lesson you learned from Elon Musk's darkest year. Thank you for watching, and remember, never judge a tree by its branches. Always look at the roots. Stay focused, stay resilient, and we will see you in the next video.